Good morning, Brew Daily show. I'm Neal Freyman.
And I'm Toby Howell.
Today, why is Elon selling his AI startup to his rocket company?
Then minivans are so back. It's Tuesday, February 3rd. Let's ride.
Look, it's been a brutal winter out there in the tundra of New York. Temperatures didn't rise above freezing for 9 straight days. This morning, it's colder here than in Nuuk, Greenland. In Florida, they've got frozen iguanas falling out of trees. And to top it all off, Phil the groundhog predicted 6 more weeks of this. And yet, there's light at the end of the tunnel, literally. Over the next 28 days, we gain 77 minutes of daylight, and that's before daylight saving time begins on March 8th.
Leaving the office and not having it be pitch black is a moment to be celebrated and cherished. At this rate, you'll be suntanning in no time. Speaking of rates, though, right now we are tacking on 2 minutes and 30 seconds of daylight per day, but that will rise closer to 3 minutes by the end of the month and peak around the March equinox before slowing down in the summer. Never knew that it wasn't a consistent rate, so thank you to the Old Farmer's Almanac for teaching me that.
And now a word from our sponsor, our very relevant sponsor, Sandals. This cold weather is really affecting my mood, Toby.
For the better?
No, this is the first time I've left my apartment in days. If only I were at a Sandals resort.
Sandals adult-only resorts let you explore the Caribbean's most beautiful islands and best beaches with powder white sand and turquoise waters. Perfect for kicking back, sipping a Mai Tai, and reading a good book.
Plus, enjoying globally inspired dining across more than 10 restaurants per resort, including food trucks, Italian cuisine, their new Buchan locally sourced dining concept, and the world-famous Jamaican Jerk Shack.
There is no better place to experience the Caribbean than at resorts founded by a family from the Caribbean. The Winter Blue Sale last day is today, so visit sandals.com for the best all-inclusive value in the Caribbean. That's sandals.com.
They're calling it the most ambitious mashup since DJ Earworm's United States of Pop 2009. Elon Musk is combining 2 of his companies, the rocket giant SpaceX and his AI startup xAI. The deal, which was announced yesterday, marks the collision of 2 supernovas in Musk's universe. And the term mega merger wouldn't do this justice. SpaceX and xAI were 2 of the most valuable private companies in the world, and together they'll form the biggest. In the deal, SpaceX is valued at $1 trillion, more than all but 11 public companies, while xAI was valued at $250 billion, also more than most public companies. The combined company will be worth, doing some back-of-the-napkin math here, $1.25 trillion. So what would it accomplish? According to Elon, the goal is to, quote, form the most ambitious vertically integrated innovation engine on and off Earth with AI rockets, space-based internet, direct-to-mobile device communications, and the world's foremost real-time information and free speech platform. But analysts think it mostly comes down to one word: money. Infrastructure for artificial intelligence, if you hadn't heard, is extremely expensive, and for that matter, so are rockets. Combining the 2 would be a tacit acknowledgement by Musk that some of his companies don't make financial sense on their own. And on top of that, SpaceX and xAI would complement each other nicely to bring data centers to space, a goal Elon said is just a couple of years away. Toby, welcome to the MCU, the Musk corporate universe.
The funniest memes that came from this mega merger is the fact that all these reports of SpaceX were in talks to acquire xAI, and everyone's like, who's he talking to, himself?
A tough negotiation.
Right. It's literally Elon negotiating with Elon, but this is a pattern. If you've watched Elon's career over the years, he loves doing this. In 2016, he used Tesla stock to acquire Solar City, which his cousin was running. Last year, he used xAI to acquire X. So this kind of Russian doll of corporate maneuvering is something that is an Elon trademark, because this is how he likes to run his companies. He loves moving staff and resources in between companies in ways that most other, corporations wouldn't do so. I remember reading the Elon Musk biography last year from Walter Isaacson, and he brings in SpaceX engineers to work with the Twitter takeover, which you wouldn't think that those 2 businesses are very similar, but in the Muskiverse, he does like sharing resources like that, and this is another instance, albeit the biggest one ever.
Yeah, he really does love going Kirby mode. As Ryan Mack pointed out on X, this was the 3rd time that Elon Musk has bought Twitter in 4 years, because he bought it for $44 billion by himself, and then he used xAI to buy Twitter, and then now he's using SpaceX SpaceX to buy xAI, which also owns Twitter. So that is true. That is the third time in 4 years. Let's not lose sight of how daringly ambitious this is. Axios' Dan Primack called it one of the most audacious moves in the history of business and tech, arguably betting his empire on the idea of orbital data centers that are powered by the sun, because that is the through line through this SpaceX xAI merger. Elon Musk doesn't think that terrestrial data centers are going to do the job in terms of cost, and they're going to run into land regulations and pushback. And he and a bunch of other leaders in the space think that the ultimate future for data centers that power AI are going to be in space. And now that's easy to say, but this is the ultimate goal with this $1.25 trillion company, is to build data centers in space, which is truly crazy to think about.
Yeah, he thinks that xAI is going to benefit for the increased compute capacity of sending those data centers up into orbit. He thinks Tesla's ability to manufacture energy storage could actually help SpaceX figure out this data center in space problem. And then he also has talked about using SpaceX Starships to carry Tesla Optimus robots to the moon and Mars and beyond as well. So that gives you just another peek into how his brain is working here, what that flywheel might look like. But all of it comes undone if you can't actually put data centers in space, which is still a big if, as much as it makes sense in terms of the fact that there's all abundant energy and space up there. It's still a very difficult engineering problem. Some would say, yeah, to say the least, Elon probably might be the best person to attack that engineering problem, but if he can pull it off is the big if in this scenario.
You mentioned Tesla, which is kind of a big question mark here, because that's the other big crown jewel in Elon Musk's portfolio of companies. Tesla is not involved in this deal. It's just xAI and SpaceX. There had been rumors that Tesla would be merging with SpaceX and xAI as well. The difference there is Tesla is a public company, and when it wouldn't totally be Elon Musk negotiating against himself. xAI and SpaceX are private. When you bring Tesla into the picture, there are shareholders, there's Delawares involved. You know, it gets to be a lot of paperwork, and Tesla is moving towards a robotics future. It's unclear where all of this fits in the entire constellation of Elon Musk. But the trend line is convergence, as Elon admits himself. So it wouldn't be so crazy to see Tesla folded in there one day. And the one thing we also haven't mentioned is that SpaceX is planning to IPO later this year, because it also needs a lot of fresh capital to do the rocket thing. And I guess that IPO is going to be the biggest of all time. And then you fold in another $250 billion company into it, it's going to be even bigger than that. Moving on, yesterday we talked about new CEOs taking over at Walmart and Target. Now another crown jewel of corporate America is preparing its own succession plans. Disney. This week, Disney's board is going to meet to select a replacement for Bob Iger, who's held 2 stints as mouse-in-chief. First was from 2005 to 2020, then from 2022 until very soon, it appears. Disney will hope to avoid repeating its succession debacle from 2020. Back then, Iger handed the keys to the Magic Kingdom to Bob Chapek, a decision he quickly regretted and reversed just 3 years later, firing his fellow Bob and reinstalling himself as CEO. Now, as he prepares to retire again, Iger is confident Disney will undergo a smoother transition, mostly because of, according to him, how well he's done during his second stint in charge. Iger told CNBC, "I think what is noteworthy is that when I came back 3 years ago, I had a tremendous amount that needed fixing. But thanks to his repair job, the next CEO will be given, quote, a good hand in terms of the strength of the company and a number of opportunities to grow." Disney is indeed clicking on many levels as a new era dawns. Yesterday, it reported a solid fourth quarter thanks to surging streaming income and an insanely profitable theme park division that makes more money than Scrooge McDuck. Toby, you can't screw this up twice, can you?
You absolutely can screw it up twice. This has been a drag on Disney stock for a while now, because succession has always been a thing that's just been hovering over the company. What do you do in a post-Iger era, because the last one went so poorly? It looks like they're going to look internal for candidates. The 2 leading ones are Josh D'Amaro, who oversees the parks, cruises, and consumer products division, and then there's Dana Waldron, who oversees TV and film content. It's not necessarily a 2-horse race anymore, though. Josh D'Amaro, who is the park leader, is more than likely going to be the heir apparent to Iger, because as you said, it's making more money than Scrooge McDuck. The parks business has been the main profit center for Disney for the last decade or so. Even as they've done this big transformation into a streaming giant, people still love going to Disney World. They still love, buying giant turkey legs at concession stands. And we saw that in their last earnings, actually. Even though park visitors only bumped up 1%, we saw earnings in that division jump 4%. So people are spending more money when they're, doing a beer tour around Epcot.
Well, they're raising prices. That's one of the main reasons that they're making more money. Disney raised prices at its parks for the 4th straight year, and people are still paying up. They did mention one particular challenge, and that was international visitation headwinds. They said that fewer people were coming from internationally to parks in the United States, and I guess that has to do with sort of Trump's immigration crackdown. That's an interesting data point there. Let's talk about streaming. You said Disney's moving into becoming a streaming-first company, and that unit did absolutely gangbusters last quarter, growing 72%. That's also due to price hikes. Disney has raised prices for Disney Plus, Hulu, or both in each of the past 5 years. Now, what's interesting about this is that Disney Plus, the streaming service, was not profitable for many years. It was an absolute money pit. So the fact that they're making about $450 million on the streaming service is also good news, that they can start squeeze out profits from what had been, a profit loss making area.
One thing that I thought was funny too, just a little tidbit, is that Bob Iger brought up Disney's 2019 acquisition of 21st Century Fox in this last earnings cycle, because they bought 21st Century Fox for $71 billion. And he says it actually compares quite favorably to Warner Brothers Discovery being shopped around for $72 billion. So he is kind of doing like this thing where he's padding his resume a little bit, saying like, the company's in a great spot as I'm leaving. Like, that acquisition that everyone got maybe mad at me for is doing great right now. So definitely something to watch going forward is how this transition is handled, because they've boofed it once. Let's see if they boof it again. Moving on, Christopher Nolan's summer blockbuster isn't the only thing bringing attention to the Odyssey these days. Minivans, including the Honda Odyssey, are making a surprise comeback, a resurgence I want to talk about on today's edition of Toby's Trends. Minivan sales in the U.S. nearly topped 400,000 last year, rising 21% from the year prior, doing donuts around the broader auto market, which saw just 2% growth. Part of the reason for the big sales of minivans is dudes. Men around 40 years old have historically favored SUVs and trucks, but that image problem is fading and men are buying, especially as Gen X and baby boomers reach grandparents' age. Minivans also compete well with SUVs on cost, offering similar cargo capacity for much less money. The average new car price in the US is around $51,000, but you can drive off the lot in a brand new Chrysler Voyager for $40,000 or a Christopher Nolan approved Honda Odyssey for $43,000. Neal, I've always been team minivan. 3-row seating, space for gear and groceries. You can stick a 2x4 in there or 2 to 4 kids. Glad to see they are making a comeback.
It's just such good bang for your buck. They're really the Boston Market rotisserie chicken meal of cars. You get a little bit of everything and you're always filled up afterward. In the 1980s and 1990s, minivan was absolutely dominant. My family had one in the 90s. I assume yours did too.
I was suburban, actually.
You were suburban, so you just liked minivans from afar. But then they grew to become less than 2% of the new vehicle market. This comeback that you're talking about has them now at 2.4% market share. It's huge, but I kid, but that's actually the highest level since 2019 when it was also at 2.4%. So there has been a resurgence for all the reasons you mentioned.
Yeah, that is a good market data point to cite. You're not seeing half the cars on the road being minivans. 2% is not much, but still, I mentioned how guys are more amenable to buying minivans these days, and part of it is because of how they've been marketing themselves. Companies have been showing minivans with off-road tires, with, tents in the back, trying to push it towards more of an adventure crowd than more of a family crowd, and that has paid off dividends. Also, there's been some facelifts from bigger brands. One of the coolest looking ones is the Kia Carnival, which I didn't even know Kia had a minivan that was called the Carnival. A lot of people liken that to a spaceship. It is almost a cross between an SUV and a minivan, so it's kind of a maxi van if you want. But a lot of people are saying this thing looks like something I would want to drive. It doesn't look like the mom mobile of old that people never wanted to be caught dead in. They're looking cooler and they're selling more units.
And another thing driving the growth of minivans is the gig economy. A lot of gig workers have minivans, whether they're delivering for Amazon, Grubhub, or DoorDash, and it's also pretty popular among Uber and Lyft drivers, especially in areas where they're doing a lot of airport airport runs, every single time I'm at the airport and I call a Lyft or an Uber, it's always a minivan. It's very easy to fit cargo in there. So good for minivans, and the Chrysler Pacifica especially. We didn't even mention it, but that accounts for a quarter of all minivan sales. That's the absolute giant in the room. No offense to the Odyssey.
I could see Waymo and some of these other self-driving companies start to dip their toe into the minivan.
Waymo has Pacificas. Yeah.
They've been using them for robo-taxis. There's future fleets could be, much more minivan heavy, which, again, I'm a fan. I would love to see. All right, we're going to take a quick break and come back with a story about the movies right after this. If you want something done well, do it yourself. That was the thinking that led to the creation of the indie flick Iron Lung, which just grossed more than $22 million at the global box office in its opening weekend. The low-budget horror movie was entirely financed by the YouTube legend Mark Fishback, aka Markiplier, and his army of 38 million subscribers. The film is based on a very niche horror video game where you claustrophobically navigate a submarine, dubbed the Iron Lung, through an ocean of literal blood. To me, that sounds heinous and disgusting. To Markiplier, it sounded like a movie. So he wrote, directed, starred, and eventually plowed nearly $3 million of his own money into bringing it to life. And damn, is it living. Despite having no major studio backing it, Iron Lung debuted at number 2 on box office charts after its theatrical release was expanded to meet excess demand from ravenous fans. Neal, people are praising this movie for showing that with a little grit, hard work, and 38 million loyal YouTube subscribers, you too can take on the Hollywood machine and outgross the Melania documentary by $15 million.
Yeah, so it cost $3 million to produce, and this movie made over $20 million at the box office, so that is a healthy profit for a YouTuber. Meanwhile, it's not being split among more people because he sidesteps the traditional movie studio distribution process. So he's splitting it 50-50 with the cinemas. So he's bringing home like $10 million. I mean, that is a absolute payday. He absolutely grinded for it, though, through just years and years of hard work, building that YouTube base to $38 million. It's a remarkable story, and it reminds you of someone named Taylor Swift, who did something very similar with her Eras Tour movie, sidestepping traditional movie studios. Now, that movie brought in $93 million, so maybe it's a different bit of scale. But
in its opening weekend.
In its opening weekend. So 93 versus 20 million. Still, it is remarkable for someone to leverage their fandom like this, and he's hoping that it paves the way for more YouTubers or other content creators on the internet to do the same thing at the traditional box office.
This movie is nuts, by the way. It is very true to the video game, which fans love, but unfortunately, the camera never leaves the Iron Lung mini sub. So it's a very claustrophobic, it's a one shot movie essentially. And the other question is it a good movie? And that is up for debate because a lot of people says it's clear that Markiplier is a first-time movie maker. He probably let the edit get a little too bloated. It runs over 2 hours. Again, his fans love it because there's little Easter eggs for his fandom. There's Easter eggs to the game itself. So in terms of the market it was created for, it did very well. If you just were to see this as someone who had no idea about the video game or about Markiplier, maybe it's not the best movie.
Yeah, IndieWire's review I thought was fascinating. They said that the director seems to mistake fan loyalty for limitless attention. The result is not self-important so much as punishingly sincere. Punishingly sincere, a movie that believes so deeply in its process that it neglects cinematic momentum. Still, they said this was a very worthwhile project, and they really appreciated his efforts here. It's also, I think, big picture, looking back, we've talked about Gen Z, millennials, internet being the death of cinema, but maybe people want something different. The people who went to the movie called it a communal live streaming moment. There was chatter throughout. People were talking, and it didn't really matter, probably similar to what happened during the Eras Tour movie, because this is just a place for people to get together and experience something communally on the live screen that they've experienced on their phones or their laptops for so long. So a very cool situation. He was sobbing on this live stream on Sunday night talking about this.
I'm not going to see it. Ocean of blood. I can't get over that part. Sorry, Markiplier.
All right, let's sprint to the finish with some final headlines. The U.S. and India have struck a trade deal, according to President Trump and India's Narendra Modi, softening tensions between the two longtime allies. Trump said that tariffs on Indian goods coming to the U.S. will fall to 18% from 50% currently, in exchange for India halting its purchases of Russian oil, which angered Trump. That 50% tariff on many Indian goods was the highest rate for any major trading partner. Prime Minister Modi said he was, quote, delighted about the lower tariff rate, but did not mention Russian oil in his statement. India's stock market and the rupee both popped on the news.
Yeah, this always felt like a trade deal that was bound to happen because India sends nearly 20% of its total exports to the US. It's a big partner in that region of the world. It makes India a lot more attractive to now as a alternative manufacturing place to China. Capital Economics estimates that its GDP growth after this deal could get a major bump, 0.2 to 0.3 percentage growth. India is supposedly the growth engine in that region, not named China. So this once again kind of brings the US and India a little bit closer together after this deal was struck. Moving on, Trump is creating a piggy bank for rare minerals and pledging $12 billion to fill it. Yesterday, the White House announced the creation of Project Vault, an initiative that is meant to stockpile critical materials like gallium and cobalt that go in everything from phones to drones. The idea is to store some special rocks under the mattress to avoid reliance on China, who is far and away the dominant provider and processor of critical minerals. The project is a public-private hybrid with the likes of GM, Boeing, Google, and others, promising to contribute and buy from the stockpile. This move is definitely tied back to last year when China squeezed global supply chains by tightening export controls. That served as a wake-up call for the U.S. and its allies, leading to the rainy day rock pile that is Project Vault.
It even goes further back than that to the 1970s when the United States created the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. That's when there was this Arab oil embargo. There was a shortage of gas everywhere. We weren't alive, but the lines at the gas pump were extremely long. So the United States created this Strategic Petroleum Reserve. This rare earths one is modeled after that. And it's a good opportunity to just zoom out and talk about all the fun strategic reserves there are all across the world, because for the past few decades, countries have been stockpiling goods in case of emergencies. And, the goods are not the same across each country. For example, Canada has a strategic butter reserve that can weigh as much as 39 million pounds because you need to have your butter. And then also, this is probably the most famous example, Canada does have a strategic reserve of maple syrup capable of holding almost 100 million pounds of maple syrup. In case there is an apocalypse, our pancakes will be well syruped. China has a strategic pork reserve. Malaysia has one for frozen fish. And Vietnam, this one was just started at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, stockpiled 270,000 metric tons of rice.
You missed my favorite one, though, which is the kimchi storehouse that South Korea has, because in case, you run out of kimchi. I love how you can just put strategic in front of everything and it just takes on grander importance. Like, I have a strategic Lucky Charms reserve up in my counter space right now. So strategic food reserves are just always fun to talk about.
Finally, Lunar New Year is coming up in China, and everyone's scrambling to buy a toy with a glaring manufacturing error. Dubbed the crying horse on social media, where it's absolutely blowing up, the toy is a plushy horse that was originally supposed to have a smiley face, but after a 180-degree sewing mix-up, that smile was turned into a frown. Sellers are moving 15,000 units a day as they struggle to meet demand, even after adding a dozen production lines for both the frowny and smiley versions of the horse. Toby, yes, it's extremely goofy, but there's also something much deeper behind this craze.
Yeah, it's a perfect symbol for how a lot of, Chinese people are feeling right now, where 2026 is the Chinese zodiac sign. It is the fire horse. It's supposed to be all about ambition, growth, passion, etc. But a lot of people are feeling burnt out with wage stagnation amid this 996 work culture that is just making people work too hard and just not feel like they're, having a good participation in the economy in a lot of regards. So what is the best way to show that? It is literally a horse that is supposed to embody the year with a frown on its face. So we'll see how long this actual craze lasts, because if we know one thing about collectors in China, they can often boost things up to gigantic heights. I'm thinking of Labubu before those prices come crashing it down. So we'll see how long the frowny horse kind of remains in the zeitgeist.
Yeah, but I love it because you can do the pair. You can do the smiley and then you can do the frowny. But also, yes, you're right. This is a place, this is a country that also had the number number one app be Are You Dead, where you had to check in every single day or every couple of days to make sure you're not dead. But yeah, I need to get my hands on this frowny horse. Looks so funny. That is all the time we have. Thanks so much for starting your morning with us, and have a wonderful Tuesday, which, how the heck is it only Tuesday? This is the longest week ever. If you want to get in touch, send an email to morningbrew@morningbrew.com or DM us on Instagram at MBDailyShow. Let's roll the credits. Emily Milliron is our executive producer. Raymond Liu is our producer. Our associate producers are Olivia Graham and Olivia Lake. Hair is merging with makeup. Devin Emery is our president, and our show is a production of Morning Brew.
Great show today, Neal. Let's run it back tomorrow.